Okay, hello everyone. Today in this talk, I would like to explain some of the ideas in the article in the Year One Fashion book, A Brief History of Sustainable Fashion by Nayeli Gonzalez. It is from the website triplepundit.com, and you can read the full article if you follow the website address. In this talk today, I will read through the article paragraph by paragraph and sentence by sentence. I will explain some of the difficult ideas in the language. Also, I will give you more information about some of the topics in the article, and there will also be some videos which will give you more information. And I hope after my talk today, you will have a much better understanding of the article and also some of the issues that are surrounding this topic. Okay, let's get started. So, paragraph 1. Globalization allows us to not pay very much for clothes, said Linda Welters, fashion professor. Okay, globalization, we'll have a look at that in 1 minute now. Hang on. If people buy at a deeply reduced price, they have a throwaway mentality about clothes. And that's one major factor that's a problem. Okay. Basically here, if people can buy clothes very cheaply, that means they will have a throwaway mentality. Mentality is like taidu, attitude. Throwaway means, throw away. It is very cheap, so I just use it and throw it away. This has serious impact on the environment, but it also leads us to a very important issue in the fashion industry. Where are our clothes made? Okay, that's easy enough. So let's look at some of these things in a little bit more detail. So as I told you before, Wikipedia can be a good place for you to find some simple ideas about a topic if you just want to know the basic idea. So globalization is the connection of different parts of the world, resulting in the expansion of international cultural, economic, and political activities. This means the world becoming smaller and smaller and having connections between different things. It's like the iPhone being designed in California, but built in Shenzhen with the parts coming from Africa and other places. It's the connection of the world in business and also in culture and things like this. It's a very interesting subject. You should find out more about this. Okay, so now we'd like to look at our first video, which is something about the impact of throwing away cheap clothes. Okay, this is a news report, so let's have a look and see what we can learn from this.
Guidance, anything is possible. At a clinic to give old clothes a new lease of life and counter the culture of buying too much too often.
It's extending the life of clothes, and by that you're reducing landfill, you're reducing waste. And it's making an active stand against just going out and buying on an impulse because you want to wear something tonight.
Fashion is big business in Britain and around the world. The availability of fast, cheap fashion with a short shelf life to reflect the latest trends has transformed the industry, but it's also come at a cost. Globally, the UN says the industry is responsible for more carbon emissions than aviation and maritime shipping combined. A recent report found that here in the UK, we buy more clothes per person than anywhere else in Europe. Some things are worn just once and then thrown away. And while there are increasing efforts to ensure that garments don't end up in landfill, global consumption of clothing is increasing. So much so that consumption is predicted to rise by 63% by 2030. At a warehouse in London, though, they're trying to turn the tide, with donated clothing being sorted to sell in a growing second-hand market.
We're still collecting the same amount of clothing that we've always collected. That actually hasn't increased. But what we are seeing a change in is the amounts of clothing that we're selling. So over the last 5 years, our sales of second-hand clothing within our shops has increased by 40%.
It may, though, be down to the next generation of designers to make the difference. Graduates at the London College of Fashion showcase their work using sustainable materials. What happens here often ends up being replicated elsewhere.
So it's about really kind of valuing everything that goes into it. You know, all of these precious resources, whether it's cotton, whether it's wool, or whether even it's a synthetic, use natural resources, and we need to put a true cost on those.
Campaigners want clothing like this that's made to last. Until that message gets through, the environment and the workers making this week's must-have item for low wages will continue to pay the price. Emma Hayward, Al Jazeera in London.
Okay, so again, there in this video, you can see something of what happens when clothes are thrown away. And you can also try to find out more about this yourself, about how many of the clothes from fast fashion can end up polluting the environment and going into landfill. The second video we're going to look at is just sort of a video with some music, which is trying to make a very important point. It's trying to encourage people to think about who made their clothes. It starts with the woman who picked the cotton to make the clothes. It moves on to the factory worker who changes the color. Then it moves on to the sewing machine place, and finally to the finishing with the sewing. So have a look at this. Hopefully it can make you think a little bit about who made your clothes. Okay, so again, some very interesting ideas there. These are questions that you can look for further. Remember, this is the reason why we read. We want to find out more information. Okay, let's move on. Paragraph 2. We need to look back at the history of fashion manufacturing if we want to understand why the question of where our clothes are made is so important. Okay, so that just means we need to understand the history of manufacturing. That's like 生产, you know, making of clothes and garments. It's a very interesting topic. In the 1980s and 1990s, fashion companies in Europe and the USA moved their manufacturing to places like Cambodia, Vietnam, China, Mongolia, and Bangladesh, where the employment laws were less strict. Employment laws means the rules and laws that surround things like employment, what bosses can and cannot do. So they were less strict in those places. There were fewer restrictions on the minimum age of employees, and companies were not obliged to pay their employees a minimum wage. So in some of these countries in the 1980s and 1990s, so younger people could work in these factories. Sometimes children could work in these factories to make more money for their families. Sometimes these companies could just pay the lowest salary possible. There was no minimum wage. Okay, so again, these are important points. Basically, fashion companies could use this method to manufacture their garments for a fraction of the cost of making the clothes themselves. So again, think about this. A company in America in the past, it would make its clothes in somewhere like New York, paying workers there, and maybe they would have to pay more for rent of the factory. They would have to pay more for salaries for the employees. But if they can move all of the manufacturing to a developing country, they can save a lot of money and they can make more profit. So this is the basic idea. Again, this is called outsourcing. This is something you need to understand as a design student. It's very important. Outsourcing is a term from economics. Sometimes a company decides to change its structure in such a way that it no longer performs certain tasks which are not its core business. So for fashion, the fashion company would decide, okay, we will design the clothes, yes, we will sell the clothes, yes, but maybe we will not manufacture them. We will hire, we will ask some other company to do this for us and try to save money. So again, understand this idea. It's very, very important. Again, for example, if you look at somewhere like Zara, which is based in Chibaya in Spain, here is sort of some information about all of the flights with goods, shipping, that come into the airport in Spain for Zara from all around the world, from China, from India, from Bangladesh, from Korea. So look at that, the way a fashion company now will have its manufacturing all over the world. Again, a very interesting idea. Paragraph 3. These companies would sign contracts with local garment factory owners in these countries to outsource their production. Production means to produce, to make, to manufacture. All right. So this allowed fashion companies to greatly reduce their manufacturing costs and to increase their profits. So 他们可以减少他们的生产的钱, so they can really make their production cost, manufacturing cost much lower. And as a result, their profit becomes much higher. Okay. So simultaneously, that means at the same time, customers also lost contact with how and where their clothes were made. You know, again, the customer doesn't know and usually doesn't care where the clothes were made. It's far away, it's not here. The result for the customer is cheap clothes, so they are happy and they don't think too much about it. Okay, so this is a very important consequence of this idea. Now, the rise of conscious consumerism, paragraph 1 and 2. The movement to manufacture clothes abroad led to many controversies. Consumers began to question the origin of their garments. Okay, so manufacture clothes abroad, that means to make the clothes in different countries, led to many controversies. Controversies means big scandal. Is like a story that is shows some very bad aspect of things, that makes the company look very bad. As a result, consumers began to question the origin of their garments. They started to think, hey, where was this clothes made? Where were they made? How were they made? Okay. In 1991, Nike came under fire for the low wages and poor working conditions at one of its Indonesian factories. Consumer protests and boycotts, as well as heavy media attention, drove the company to make some serious changes to its supply chain. Okay, there's a lot there. So Nike came under fire. That means Nike was criticized a lot. Criticized, newspapers by famous people criticized. They got a lot of negative stories in newspapers and TV for the low wages and poor working conditions at one of its Indonesian factories. So it was discovered that Nike's factory in Indonesia paid very low wages and the working conditions were very bad. What was the result? Consumer protests. That means customers saying, no, don't buy Nike. Boycotts, everyone agree, do not buy Nike, don't buy it. As well as heavy media attention, lots of stories in newspapers and TV. And what happened? This drove the company to make some serious changes to its supply chain. Your supply chain is how you get all of the materials for your product. So maybe you get your cotton from one country, then maybe it's made in another country. Maybe it's, so all the different parts of making garments, that is the supply chain. Maybe zips come from one part in south of China. Maybe the cotton comes from another place in India. Maybe it's made in Indonesia. All of these are part of the supply chain. We will learn more about Nike in a minute. This and other tragic incidents, the 2013 collapse of the Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh, forced the industry to take stock and shape up. Okay, so the next video we will look at is a video that shows exactly what happened at Rana Plaza. Okay, so again, these are some photographs from what happened on that day. Some of these photographs are a little bit upsetting, so let's have a look. Okay.
I started the day normally like other days. Immediately I take my camera and get there. I suddenly felt, am I in a war zone? I was hearing the scream from the rubble, someone saying, chop off my leg and pull me out. I stopped shooting. I was trying to help. Around 7:30, two volunteer worker called me and showed me two dead bodies under the rubble. I saw the bodies kind of huddle each other, holding each other to survive. I started shooting again. I felt like these images should be the voice of these people who died. No one knows their story, how they survived making these clothes for first world country. There's no question the contribution of garment industry in Bangladesh in the economy, but it needs more good rules and regulation. I see the brand names all the time. The tags remind me the tags I've seen in Rana Plaza collapse. people don't want to pay more. So if you don't want to pay more, how the producer would pay more to the worker? So it's like the chain, you know, start from the consumer and ends to the labor, you know. Still, a lot of people are missing. They didn't find their bodies. Somebody lost 2 daughters, 2 sons, husband, wife, both. Who will take their responsibility?
Okay, so again, hopefully here you can see this video can help you to really understand what exactly are the consequences for people sometimes if they have to work in factory conditions that are not safe. All right, so let's move on. The rise of conscious consumerism, paragraph 3. 24 years later, while Nike and other apparel companies still compete to drive down costs and increase margins, they also now compete to boost their reputation as good corporate citizens and win conscious consumers' hearts, minds, and wallets. So again, that's just saying that Nike and other apparel company is just a clothing company, still compete to drive down costs, okay? They want to reduce their costs as much as possible and increase margins. Margins is sort of like profit, to increase your profit, how much money you make. But they also now compete to boost, to improve their reputation. They want everyone to think about them as good companies who are concerned about their workers and concerned about the people who work to make their products. This will help them to win conscious consumers' hearts, minds, and wallets. Okay, let's look at a little example of that. So if you look at Nike, for example, you can read a little bit more here. In 1991, there was a report published on Nike's factory in Indonesia. There were below minimum wages, there was some child labor, and very bad conditions like a sweatshop. Okay, what's a sweatshop? A factory or workshop where employees work long hours for low money in conditions that are hazardous, dangerous to health. There was some other stories about Nike where they showed like 12-year-old children working on soccer balls, things like this. You can read a little bit more about it here. What did this lead to? This led to consumer consciousness, okay? Protests against Nike. You can see some of the images of protests and also T-shirts and advertisements to protest against Nike. And this had a big influence on Nike's sales. So let's look at the timeline a little bit. So 1997, you see college students in America protesting against Nike. 1998, Nike is starting to see their sales go down. They're starting to lose money. So then you see them starting to change. Here is the boss of Nike, Phil Knight. I truly believe the American consumer doesn't want to buy products made under abusive conditions. So this is a recognition that products need to be made in an ethical way. Okay, so he announces Nike will raise the minimum age of workers, will increase monitoring. This is important, okay? The factories in Indonesia and places like this are not owned by Nike, okay? They sign a contract with the factory owner to make the product. But very often, many companies then don't care what the factory does. But here, Nike is saying, okay, we're going to monitor our suppliers. That means we're going to check on them. We're going to see, what are you doing? What are you doing? How much are you paying? Is it safe? And also for clean air. 1999, Nike starts this Fair Labor Association that tries to get companies to have better practice in these factories. So they start to look at more of their factories. So here you can see, maybe this is just an interesting example of when a company faces a lot of criticism for what they do. Because they lose money, this forces them to change the way they do their business. This shows the effect of conscious consumers. And if people can be aware of who made their clothes, it can make a very big difference because the company will listen eventually. Okay, so that's the article. If you're looking for some things to follow up, of course, it's a good idea to read the full article on the website triplepundit.com. You can get some more things from it. Always try to summarize the information in each paragraph in your own words. That's always a very good thing to do. Try to explain in your own words what these words and phrases mean. What is sweatshop? What is outsource? What are working conditions? What does that mean? What is minimum wage? What is conscious consumerism? What is boycott? Again, how do you explain these words? Can you tell us in your own words? And maybe you could also have discussions with your classmates. How do you think that large fashion companies can ensure their products are manufactured in an ethical way? Okay, that's all for today. I hope this was interesting for you and that it gave you some good ideas. Thank you very much for listening.